G'day, Uncle Leon. How you doing, mate?
Bloody lovely, mate. How's your week been? You been busy? You been gigging?
Been busy, been gigging, all the stuff. What have I been doing? Yeah, I think I only did one gig on the weekend. Listened to Collingwood Geelong on the way to the gig. Have you been
Footy
watching?
season's back,
Have you
mate.
been watching footy?
I'm all in. Normally it takes me about a month of, the footy's on, but just started at the start this year.
Yep.
Carlton Richmond, draw.
Oh, like not a good game. The last 2 minutes
that
were
was
exciting,
painful.
but yeah.
Yeah. The Eagles couldn't get it over the line, unfortunately.
No, that was pretty close. Dockers was pretty not a fun game to watch as well, but that's all right. This week they'll have the rocker on the roof there to help them out.
Exactly.
Pump
Are you
up the
excited
boys.
for your first gig back of the year with the playing on the roof of a stadium?
Sure am. I just RSVP'd actually to the event, so that was nice. Oh, I've got to do my induction today.
So it's actually official.
Oh, mate, it's been official for months, but yeah, it's official. So no, that should be fun. I'll probably run the song a couple of times before the 30-second guitar solo from "We Will Rock You."
Yep.
I gotta work out what I'm gonna play in the sort of 10 seconds pre when I start. I've got like a little bit of time to mess around.
Well, there's that new Extreme song with that solo that Nuno does that everyone's making videos about. Just play that.
Could do. Like it was a cool song and the solo was cool, but I didn't immediately go like, yeah, this is like the best solo I ever heard. Are people like actually frothing it?
Yeah, people are frothing it, and that just tells me that have you ever listened to Extreme before? Because Nuno's been doing that stuff since the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, it's just a Nuno solo, right? Like all
He's
Nuno
amazing.
solos, great solo, but
News of the world, Nuno Betancourt, one of the best guitar players ever.
Yeah.
The true triple threat, can sing, handsome, plays guitar.
Yep. Has relatives in Perth.
Spent at least one New Year's in Perth once.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when you meet someone that plays guitar and they start telling you their favorite guitar players, it's like if you tell me your favorite guitar player is Slash, I'm like, okay. Or you tell me your favorite guitar player is like Angus Young, I'm like, okay. If you tell me your favorite guitar player is Nuno Betancourt, it's like, all right, you know what's happening. Like, it's not uncommon, but it's not common enough.
And that's a bit like saying what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, and someone says vanilla. It's fine if vanilla is your favorite ice cream.
Yep.
But it just makes me think: have you tried rum and raisin?
Rum and Raisin's a real Eric Clapton. Your favorite guitar player is Eric Clapton. If you like rum and raisin, like, let's be honest.
And who's the vanilla? Who's the true vanilla? Like a Mark Knopfler or
Man,
you're a big Dire Straits fan.
Oh man, I can't fucking stand Dire Straits. I don't know what it is. It's like every time I hear one of their songs, it's like, I don't know, I have this real physical reaction to it. I don't mind, what's that song, Money for Nothing? That's okay. But like Soldier Swing.
Brothers in Arms. Brothers in Arms is a song that turned me on Dire Straits. Like, that's a great song. Sailing to Philadelphia, the Mark Knopfler and James Taylor album is really nice as well. But, I always associate Dire Straits. I had a friend whose dad loved golf and his favorite band was Dire Straits.
Yeah, that's
and,
it. It's a golf
to
band.
me, they are just golf rock.
Yeah.
They're not yacht rock.
No, not yacht rock.
They're someone who enjoys the laborious sport of golf.
It's music for men in their 40s plus. I don't know how you can be a young person, at least now, and enjoy that music. It's just so bloody bland, man. I can't deal with it. He played my dad's guitar though once, like a long time ago, that Guild.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, because Dad used to play in all the hotels back in the 80s, doing this like buttock trio singing, playing sort of stuff, like going table to table basically at the restaurant. And that was at the Hyatt in Perth, and so like some of the big bands when they were touring would stay there. And so he reckons Mark Knopfler. Well, this is the story is that Mark Knopfler was there and he played Dad's guitar, and Lindsey Buckingham as well played that guitar.
Wow.
So
that's a bit of a collector's piece.
Me. So that you've played that guitar. There's four superstars of music.
Some absolute illustrious names on that list. No, it took me a long time to come around to Dire Straits, where I can listen to them now. Like I said, I think it was Brothers in Arms. That's a very good song.
Mm-hmm.
And, Mark Knopfler is awesome, but there's an aesthetic about it where, it's, to and I totally understand as well. It took me a long time to realize why people like golf, and it is a very technical kind of game, and it's got a very interesting history. It's just not for me. I grew up playing Aussie rules football, where it's just like, run as fast as you can into another person, hurt yourself immensely, but get up.
Have you ever done super golf?
No.
Oh, mate, it's like, I think near like Henley Brook, when we do it's in that sort of area.
Oh, okay.
It's like golf.
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah, the balls are like huge, and I went and did that when I was probably like 10, 11, or maybe a little bit older. No, we should go do that sometime, because like you and I are never going to a golf course. That's not going to happen.
10 years in the future. Welcome to the Gear Podcast. We're just here doing a few rounds of golf.
Yep.
I do find it interesting with golf, like people who are really good at, say, cricket or football, they love playing golf as well.
Yep.
So there's obviously something about it, something I just don't get. And I'm sure now that I've trampled all over the sport of golf and the band Dire Straits and a few other things, we can continue to alienate our fan base even further.
The only good thing about golf is that guy, John Daly.
John Daly's my hero, man. Like he is the Yngwie Malmsteen of golf.
Yeah.
Yep. Just you know who John Daly is and you know who Yngwie Malmsteen is. They're basically the same person. One's Swedish, one's not. That's maybe the main difference. But who was that guy recently as well, where basically just smashed protein shakes? Was like, I'd have 4 or 5 protein shakes a day, and he put on all this muscle, and he just it was quite controversial. This is a recent thing.
Yeah, right.
Where he was just absolutely going bunter on the golf course. He won a few tournaments, but just because he could just smash the ball so much harder. I'm trying to remember his name, and it's like, I'm going to have to look up, and I'm searching golf protein shakes. Maybe golf. I think it's like a Cameron or someone like that.
There's
what I mean?
Cameron guy now, isn't there?
No. Bryson DeChambeau. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just bulked up and, just went Eric Bugenhagen on the golf course.
Yeah, Rick Boogs. What do you reckon he benches?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely more than me. He's pretty built.
Boogs is like, and I didn't mean Boogs, but Boogs. If you don't know Boogs, just go check him out.
Definite friend of the podcast, Boogs. That'd be a top 3 dream guest to have on here.
Oh man, he's like, because he's a professional wrestler, but this is a dude that Leon, you just messaged me a picture or one of his YouTube videos probably 2 years ago. It was like, get a load of this guy. And he's the most like just jacked wrestler guy.
Wasn't the headline like world's most jacked guitarist?
Yeah.
So he's a man mountain. He's a huge guy. He's a absolutely ripped dude, but he loves guitar and he loves metal. So
he's lifting weights and screaming and
lifting weights in his home gym to like Cannibal Corpse, and he'll do some just filthy, immense. He's like doing bicep curls with something that someone would deadlift. Yeah. Like he's going hard. He's getting a pump. But then he'll walk out, pick up a guitar, and play a Cannibal Corpse riff.
Yep. And he also, I'm not sure if he does it now, but I think he got injured at WrestleMania last year. Leading up to that, he was like playing a guy to the ring, kind of like how I play the Dockers. To pump them up. Yeah, that was his entrance, which is just fucking awesome. It's always like pointy, like Jackson guitars and stuff, like full 80s rock. So
He's awesome. He's a friend of the podcast, definitely.
Yeah, we'll talk to him one time. Cheezel, we'll get them all on. Can't wait. So, what was I going to say?
We had a few questions, I think, before we dive straight in. A friend of the podcast, Kale and Neil, wanted to know, when are you and I going to do a bit of a shred collab vid, mate?
When I can remember how to shred.
Okay, there it is.
No,
you get shredded.
When I get shredded, when I can start deadlifting like 200 kilos, then we'll do it. No, to be honest though, my the way that I play guitar now, it's just so lazy because I don't really have I'll play with tones a bit. Oftentimes I'm reamping stuff too because it's consistent. But sitting down and actually working on anything, I've just given up on that. And when I say I've given up on that, I gave up on that in like 2007. So
it's been
Yeah.
It's been a long time giving up.
But like I've got like some stuff. Like I've got a few licks, like maybe 3 licks, and I've got a few little things that help me traverse the fretboard. And if I've played, like if let's say I've done 2 or 3 gigs in a week, then by Monday I sort of have the function to be able to like play the guitar in a way that if I think of something, my fingers will do it. But then there's a lot of times when it's like, man, some of these gigs that I do, it's just the easiest stuff. Like the fingers aren't working, my brain's not in it. So yeah, maybe you catch me on a good week and we'll play Scarified together. We'll finally like work on that.
We'll finally do it. Yeah. There you go. Thank you for the question. If anybody else has questions,
so it's one question.
It was one question, but I did want to get to it because Kale and Neil are good dudes.
Yeah.
And you can write to our Instagram, can't you?
Yeah, check it out. We've got, well, hang on, let me check right now.
How many followers do we have?
We were at 17 followers yesterday. That's pretty good in a week.
That's not too bad. Thank you to everybody who's followed the page. If you've got questions or topics or ideas,
17 followers.
Then let us know. We should, over the coming months, I'm slowly lining up a few special guests. So that'll be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to that. But for today, I guess there's only one thing to talk about in the world of guitar because everybody else is talking about it, Troy.
Yep.
The little green box.
The little green box. The one that isn't made by Ibanez. The one that isn't made by Nobles. The one that isn't made by Maxon.
The one that isn't made by Way Huge.
Yep.
We're, of course, talking about the Digitech Bad Monkey.
Yep.
Well, more so JHS.
Yep.
And the video that Brett Kingman did 14 years ago.
Yep. Now, you haven't seen the new video, have you?
I actually have not watched it.
Are you aware of what's been happening? Yeah, you are.
I'm well aware of the hype train. And then it feels like good old Josh Scott, he's playing 4-dimensional chess with us over here.
Yeah.
There's some outrage being generated, some hype, and then some more videos and some collaborations, and it seems like a multi-pronged pincer movement on on guitar YouTube.
Well, let me just explain what happened in the video since you haven't seen it, right? So he comes out, he's got the Bad Monkey, and have you watched much of his stuff?
I watched the JHS show. I quite like it. Like anybody else on this earth who has, a soul, you may enjoy Josh because he's funny and pulls good sounds. And just like, even, I don't know, how much have you read? Because I realized a long time ago, the show, there's like a blog that accompanies it on the website. So like I read his basically history of the Proco Rat the other day.
I watched
and it was great.
Man, that's a whole video. I watched that whole video whenever that came out like a year ago or something. Well, he does that thing where, which is very true, where you don't need to have these crazy boutique bougie pieces of equipment to make good sounds, right? Like that's
100%.
That's a whole part of his ethos, which is awesome, and that's why he's got such a vast array of pedals and he's able to pull really good sounds out of it. So he did that with the Bad Monkey, but compared that with a lot of other classic pedals. So your Tube Screamers, Clons. I don't remember what it was in there. Maybe I think he had the Morning Glory, so one of his pedals, and then there was a couple of others in there too. I don't remember exactly what was what, but so he lines up. He has it on that switcher thing. And he plays, and then he just switches between the Bad Monkey and then whatever pedal he wants to, like mid-song, and it's just like, look how close they sound. So that's cool. I mean, yeah, it proves that this pedal that came out at I think he said $59, and that you could buy secondhand for about the same price now, or if not less, can be as usable as all of these other pedals. So that's what's happened. That's what the video was.
Can't disagree with that.
But within the video, because I actually watched it, I think when it came out, because it's just, I think they must release episodes on Tuesdays. And it was last week. I think I just put the kids down and I went downstairs. I just finished watching The Last of Us. My partner and I were going through that. But I was like, all right, she's feeding my daughter. So I've got like 15, 20 minutes while that's happening to just watch something. So I watched that video. And I think he even says something in the comments about like, watch the used prices of these go up. Because that's happened a lot with videos when he's done of certain pedals, right?
100%, yeah, the so-called JHS effect.
Yeah, and so I sort of saw that and I was like, of all the things that you're gonna do, like this is clearly a joke. Like, there's no way people are going to want to pay, because it sounded awesome, but it's not something where you go like, you know, you're going to jack the price of this up to a few $100s or $1,000 or whatever. But apparently that's exactly what's happened on all of the secondhand markets. People with bad monkeys, like, there's been a lot of joke ones. People, you know, that's happened on the gas station in Perth.
$600 and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in the last few days. It's kind of a joke that was funny for the first like maybe 20 minutes, and now it's a bit old. I'm just like, we get it, everybody. So yeah, I don't actually know what they're going for at the moment, but it's certainly a lot more than what they were literally 7 days ago before the thing was put out. I have one, so that's cool. I'm not chasing one.
That's your little nest egg, is it?
Yeah, but funnily enough, like, I'm aware of the Bad Monkey not through JHS, but through Phil X.
Yeah, right.
Because I got one, maybe almost 10 years ago. In fact, I may have two. No, maybe it's just one. But what happened was I was watching a lot of Phil X videos because he is like the best.
Agreed.
And he does, it's a similar sort of thing where he's like, you know, he has that 70, I think it's a 76 JMP or maybe even a 77, of which
the barbecue grill one.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, so I watch these videos like of Phil X's rig rundowns, what he uses for recording and stuff. And he's like, well, I got this 70s JMP and I've got this 1997 Les Paul, and I just so happen to have both of those pieces of equipment, 77 JMP and a 97 Les Paul standard. But I was like, oh, cool. Well, you know, these pedals are really cheap, and you used to see them for $40. So I picked one up. And it's cool. Like, it's a drive pedal like anything else. Yeah. It's nice because it's got the EQ on it, where it's not just a straight up tone sweeping thing. It's like you've got bass and treble. So yeah, I used it a little bit. There was a day not long after. Oh no, it was probably about 2014, and I had my JMP, and I was at Crank, where I used to do a bit of recording. And I hired the front room there for about a month while the other guy went on holiday. And because I had access to it for a month, and I could, didn't have to get kicked out at a particular time. I was just go cranking up guitar sounds. I didn't have kids or anything like that. It was just, Troy time basically. But I remember playing with the Marshall, because I must have only just had that for a couple of months. And I was like, right, well, now that I can crank this up and put some mics on it, I want to sort of hear where it sounds its best. So I put some markings on it. I was like, all right, where does it start to sound like good? And at that amp on the master volume, it was around probably 9 o'clock. And then I kept turning it up, and I was like, oh, it sounds really good about 10 o'clock. And then at 11, it's like fucking painfully loud. Yeah. It sounds pretty cool. And then past that, it's a bit it gets really saggy, like what happened with Marshalls. And this is with it's been master volume modded too. So that's obviously how that works. But and the preamp game was maxed out because, it's rock and roll. But funnily enough, firstly, those settings have remained true the entire time I've owned the amp. Like, every time I go back and use it, like 10 o'clock is my favorite sound. Just
where it's good.
But yeah, I went through and tried all these pedals. So I had a Bad Monkey in there, Super Overdrive, Tube Screamer, the Anarchy Audio Workhorse. So it's a clone style thing. And I just made some
channel, Anarchy Audio, Johnny C. Hopefully we'll have him on in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. So yeah, I tried all these things out just to see what sounded. EP Booster as well. I had that in there.
Good old EP Booster.
So yeah, it was just a cool thing to make notes. And yeah, the Bad Monkey sounded really cool. It was not my favorite of those, to be honest. The Super Distortion was actually, Super Overdrive, sorry, that was my favorite.
Yep.
Of all of them. But it's a pedal like anything else. Like, Jesus Christ, it's not going to change your life. It's I
mean, if you were at a gig and you had a Bad Monkey and that's what you needed as a boost, I'm sure you'd have a totally okay time.
Yeah. It's just such a shame. It's like the whole point of that video that people always miss. It's just like, it's all good. It's like music. All music's good. It's like, it's not always appropriate for the way you feel and all this sort of stuff and what you're trying to do. But like, it's all kind of usable if you work on it.
Yeah, big time. It's like there's a great quote from the Dragon Ball Z Trunks saga. For anyone, I'll give you a quick recap. At the end of the Frieza saga, the universal apocalypse is averted by Goku, who goes Super Saiyan and defeats the evil overlord Frieza. Finally, once and for all, the Trunks saga begins with a mysterious stranger appearing on Earth after Frieza and his dad, King Cold.
King Cold.
King Cold, that's right, yeah. Miraculously appear on Earth and are going to destroy Earth. So this character called Trunks shows up and just beast modes Frieza. They're like, wow, how strong is this guy? And he says, I need to speak to Goku. They have a bit of a chat. And, you know, basically what happens is Piccolo, who's a kind of, he's from this planet called Namek, and he's got these big ears. And basically, you know, Trunks is like, warning, like the real bad guys are coming in the future, start training. P.S. Take this heart medicine, Goku, because you picked up a weird virus on a planet that you went to. So, you know, there's that. But then he comes over and Piccolo's like, I'm gonna play you the quotation from the thing. He's like, I heard what happened, Goku. And Goku's like, but how did you know? And he goes, my ears do more than frame my face. So my long point is those things on the side of your head that frame your face, they're actually pretty good for listening to things. And yeah, that seems to be...
Mate, that was 2 minutes to get to that point. I was...
long-form content, mate.
That was a good Piccolo as well.
You know, once you get old and crusty enough, you know, it's all accessible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what's the point here? Yeah, you know, definitely. And of course, like, you know, here's the thing. Here would be my immediate pushback is like, you know, like, of course, Josh has really good intentions and it's an excellent video and they're all made really, really well. But it's like, you have to fundamentally understand your audience and human nature and the fact that we're all morons and most people will get the joke, but you just need a critical mass of people to not get the joke for it to become like, you know, a $650 listing on Reverb that somebody else pays money for because we're idiots.
I mean, I'm not certain what demographic of guitar player is going out and actually buying that stuff. I mean, he did say in the video too, something to the effect of just, they'll go up in price on Reverb, just wait 3 weeks and they'll probably come back to normal. But it's like, you know, is it just the doctor lawyer sort of squad of guitar players that are watching this and like, I better have this boutique pedal?
Is it stonks?
What's a stonk?
What was was it GameStop a couple of years ago?
Oh, yeah.
As a joke, a bunch of people started buying their stock and it massively overinflated and had like a run on the market.
That was allegedly a very well-planned thing. Like
insider.
Yeah, oh, maybe not insider, but it was planned by some investors over a long period of time. It was, people got like pretty fucked on it at the very end, trying to get involved, but the core, however many dozen people or something or less or more, I don't know, they made bank on that. So
because it's kind of, I've been seeing videos come out which are like, you know, other pedal focused YouTubers doing videos with Josh, you know, and sort of talking about, well, here's the thing with, here's the truth and stuff like that. So it does feel a bit stonksy to me in that kind of,
right.
Not to be confused with Brian Stonks, who was a hell good footballer, Stonksy as he was known. Yeah, so that would, look, this is a very, very long-winded way of saying, you know, it's, you know, and very much the JHS show, you know, you can tell there's that, it's the sense of humor for people who have grown up watching Seinfeld their entire life. Yep. So it's definitely a bit, you know, and I don't think really it should be read as anything too much deeper than a bit. Like, yeah, most pedals sound pretty good. Maybe spend less time like worrying about it and more time going and having a good time playing music.
Yeah. I mean, I get that from his perspective, so I don't think there's any conspiracy from that. It's just the dumb guitar playing community that doesn't get it. And yeah, hopefully this is not going to be a talking point in a few weeks. We'll just get over it and get back onto loving our noble overdrive or whatever.
I'm sure there'll be some other thing where, you know, well, I you know, while we're on the topic of Josh, it's like, you know, they came out with that thing recently where it was like, oh yeah, you know, the amp that's been in all my videos, have you noticed how there hasn't been a microphone in front of it? I've been using a Kemper for everything.
Yep.
P.S. Here are my Kemper profiles. You can buy them. So I can totally understand where a more cynical person would go like, oh, no, actually, you understand your audience very, very, very well, and you're kind of monetizing that. But you know what? Good on you. That's the platform, more power to you, because how is that different to selling a clone of a pedal in a box with a picture of a cute animal on it?
Yeah, sure.
I also think it's like, there's been the other way in which the guitar community, in air quotes, there's like, there was all that stuff with JHS where it's like, what, he donated some money to a church, and then, the church was doing some stuff that people didn't agree with, and,
Man, that was like a thing 10 years ago. And that was the weird thing when I started seeing the JHS videos coming up, because in my, you hear something sometime and it just sticks in your brain as like, maybe that's not a ethically nice or appropriate company to support or whatever. That's not limited to guitar stuff. That's just in general, like some people that have opinions that you do or don't agree with, maybe you don't support them. You don't have to make a big deal of it. You just don't give them all your money. But anyway, with that,
no, I insist. Go on Twitter and really proclaim why you're such a good person for doing those things.
Well, yeah, it's not so much about proclaiming as much as like, oh, I've heard that person's kind of
just get on with your life.
Yeah. Anyway, I remember that there being like a bit of a thing about him. Yeah, exactly. What you say with there was like a church. It was like a real. I want to say it was like an anti-abortion sort of a situation, or there was something else. It was not good. It was like a real, because I think they're in Mississippi or something.
Missouri?
Is it? Yeah. Well, whatever. Stereotypical, preconceived ideas you have of that area of the world, like. That was the sort of the topic that was up for discussion there.
And shout out to anybody listening from Missouri, because I've played a lot of gigs there and had a lot of really good gigs there, and some very, very kind and generous people who look after us anytime we play there. So
yeah, I mean, all that.
Yeah. Anyway, my point was there was kind of, I guess, when you've had your kind of reputation and livelihood on the line like that, maybe there's just an element of it where it's like, well, you know what? I'm just going to have fun and realize that, again, guitar players are idiots. So I'm going to show them that a bad monkey, this so-called undesirable thing, is totally fine.
Well, just quickly on the other thing, though. I mean, like, from what I understand, because I looked it up through a huge amount of forum posts, and because, like, people love to discuss the things,
Yep.
Maybe it's not all in a YouTube video, but yeah, there was like, I think it was a combination of that. And there was some other pedal manufacturer that I think did like a Supro clone, like not a Supro clone, but like put this a Supro in a pedal.
Gotcha.
And then JHS did like a very similar thing, and allegedly it's the same circuit, and someone was ripped off, and then that became its own like controversy. And all these things I think happened around the same time, so there was a bit of negative press around him. But then, as I understand it, or as I remember from reading the posts. It turned out to be a bit of a non-thing, and a bit of a and someone correct me if if I don't understand this, but just blowing stuff out of proportion. Kind of like the thing with fucking the YouTuber guy that went on about, what was the British guy? Chapman Guitars.
Yes.
And how like all the controversy around Rob Chapman was like kind of started from one YouTube video that a guy just put a hit piece out on him, and then that was that kind of like...
and then Rob doxed him, which is a great move. And then, kind of say goodbye to a lot of your credibility in the guitar community in general. So
anyway, that's like, I think things got a bit blown out of proportion, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to have blown over, and he seems like he's doing fine. So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if Vertex Effects can be out there building pro rigs for people without the controversy, where it's like, then I guess it's fair game for anybody else. And that's a whole saga, isn't it?
Yep. Mate, what is it with, gear manufacturers? Like, you got your, well, there's a couple that we've mentioned. What about in the amp community? Like Cameron, there was a bunch of stuff with that, right?
Oh man, yeah, I feel like feel like the deeper you dig with this stuff, the kind of crazier it gets. You know, the Vertex thing was, they were, what was it? They had a wah pedal that they claimed was all this kind of stuff, and it was literally a rehoused BBE. And they had signature pedals with people, and they've just like repeatedly lied about things that they supposed to do, and then come clean and then being like, oh no, it's all good now. So there's a whole bunch of people who are aware of that who will never touch any of that stuff. And still go and eat at McDonald's.
Well, that is another thing. It's
you got to pick your battles, though, don't you?
You have to draw your moral line somewhere. Which is,
I mean, in the words of Reverend Lovejoy, have you read this thing? We're technically not even allowed to go to the bathroom. Like that's really it. So it's who am I getting high and mighty about anything? But yeah, it is. I think the Cameron thing was probably more sinister, where it's like, it took people's money, did not deliver goods.
Yep.
For a long time, or in some cases did not deliver goods and stuff like that. And man, I've heard some absolute tales of woe and wonder around that, which are pretty crazy. So that's anyway,
I mean,
bring it back around to the bad monkey. How much are you going to list yours for?
Yeah, well, I should drag it out. I had a session on the weekend of which I would have been perfect to drag it out and have a listen to it, but I did not do that. So instead, did we even use pedals? No, I think we just use amps because we're cool. Oh no, I used the workhorse, the Klon thing.
Yeah,
that was
awesome.
That was really cool.
That's still one of my favorite pieces of graphic art, where it's a
professional overdrive, a horse in a business suit. Like, man, I still look at that and it makes me laugh. Like, actually makes me belly laugh when I think about it. Because we got some of the first ones. Hey.
Yeah. I think you did 10-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe a dozen of the first run. And I remember you said you were getting one. I was like, well, I'm getting one because even if I don't like it, I need that graphic.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we should get Johnny on and we'll talk to him in a few weeks because I've got some questions for him. He's made me that custom pedal, the OCD rat thing. That was really cool. I'm not sure if it still is, but at one point was like the most complicated thing he ever had to try and make.
Yep. And for someone who does not rehouse pedals, he's been very kind to me and rehouse a few things for me and helped me mod my MP1 and
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I did the 3TM. That was cool.
Yeah. Cool, which sounds awesome. So it's interesting. I guess it's I was reading a very, very good book I'd recommend to anyone with a passing interest in history. It's called The Dawn of Everything. It's by an anthropologist and a historian. And it's an attempt to be like a kind of, here's a grand sweeping narrative of human history, which mostly boils down to, all the stuff you learnt at school, just bullshit, not even close to aligning with the current academic literature. Part of the other thing is that there's so much in the academic literature that, there's the issue with people over specializing. And at least with the guitar community, if you play jazz or you play like death metal or indie, like you've probably watched or are aware of that Bad Monkey thing. And like, we all kind of love the same gear. So I like that there's that shared space, if you want, where people can just talk about stuff and you're like, oh, well, I don't like it for this, but I like it for this. I digress. One of the things they talk about is like, one theory of how you end up with like, say, Kings or something like that is that people start off by just like playing games and having a fat time and like, we're going to have a festival where this guy is just going to be in charge of everything. So you have to do what he says. And how that idea can break out into not being a temporary thing and being like a permanent thing.
Right.
What I'm trying to turn this back into is this idea of, somebody basically that when you're on I guess it's just having influence where you're able to shine a light on something that you care about and suddenly people across the world care about it and buy into it as well. I find that really fascinating. Like, like Tube Screamer style drives. Yeah, we all know what they do, but it's like, how does that meme take place?
What do you think your influence on 80s rack gear has had, or your influence had on 80s rack gear?
Well, hopefully it's convinced some people not to bother with it and to just go and buy an Axe FX. because that's pretty much been my conclusion at the end of all of it. There's some really cool stuff. And the tech head in me, like I'm looking at an Eventide at the moment, it's like it's a cool piece of hardware, but yeah, I guess unless you're running a studio or you really particularly like that sound, you can do that thing. You know, the H3000 is the clone and the Sound Toys plugin is the bad monkey.
I think that's
you know,
not even a close enough comparison. I mean, the clon is the clon, and the Eventide's the clon, and the Anarchy Audio workhorse is maybe the Sound Toy. Oh, hang on, does that make sense? Anyway, it's like that doesn't. Yeah, that's also a very bad analogy. It doesn't really matter. It's like everything's
I'm falling flat on my face here.
I mean, like I do run a studio, and I have constant, like, since I've been in this space for 5 years, I've gone through phases where I'm like, right, I'm going to start using more hardware because I have a lot of it already that I've collected over the last few years. And that might be compressors, it might be EQs, it might be reverb units and delay units and stuff. And I've gone to maybe not super great lengths, but I've certainly spent like money to build the usability of this into my system. And what inevitably has happened in terms of hardware is I've used something like once or maybe twice and then forgotten that I did it and then use a plugin. So it's not to say that, like, because I did a track probably 2 years ago now where I had borrowed your Lexicon PCM81.
Yep.
And I used that as a vocal reverb.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a beautiful vocal reverb. But I haven't missed it in the 2 years I haven't had that unit at the studio. It's like I've got so many other options, which, you know, for me, I sort of know what I'm doing now. Like roughly with the equipment that I have, I can make it sound, you know, close enough, or at least give me a sensation that I want without having to go out and spend all the money on the hardware gear, but also get like the routing to make it like functional. That is a difficult thing.
Patch bays and, you know, converters, and I mean, it's not just now I have a hardware reverb unit. Happy days. Like, that has to be integrated into your setup. A few weeks ago when I was putting together the Syn 30 and trying to work out how I'm going to use that for the gigs, because I do really like using delay and reverb in an effects loop. Yep.
And I don't like the way any of that sounds in front. I can never get the mix right on the delay and the reverb. We might have talked about that, but I thought for a hot second, like, right, maybe I just have a rack with like a delay or a reverb or both or whatever, and I can take that, and it's the right size to fit underneath the head. It should all look right and sit right. And then it's like, well, far out, man. I don't. That's another thing to take to the gig. Another thing I've got to power and plug in. And I already have that on the pedal board with the HX Stomp. So it's a little bit more cabling, but it's integrated into the system already. So why bring something else in, another point of failure? It's like unnecessary.
That, and I guess you said a good thing earlier where it's like you haven't missed it.
Yeah.
That's probably a good metric for like what is a good piece of gear. You know, when you don't have it, you're actually like, I wish I had that thing.
Yeah. Which
probably, you know, for what we're doing a lot of the time boils more down to like, well, I want a particular style of amp more so than a style of pedal, or I want a particular speaker and microphone combination, and which is cool because you've got the amp switcher in your studio now and stuff like that.
I could just feel it coming.
Yeah, could you feel it coming, Troy? Could you feel the seamless segue of our professional podcast?
Yeah,
it's our commitment to professionalism, mate.
I mean, if I was professional, I wouldn't call attention to it, but I just find it so, because I never know when it's coming. I just like, you know, Leon's done talking about that one thing. Let's talk about something else. I'm just gonna go there.
Leon has fired pot shots at several prominent members of the pedal industry.
Yep.
He's insulted Dire Straits fans. He's made an enemy of everybody who's ever played the game of golf.
Yep.
So
good thing this isn't on your YouTube channel, mate. You'd be in real trouble.
It's a good thing that people who listen to this podcast are reasonable human beings.
Yep. We should do another in person at some point and film it.
Definitely. I like the idea of at least once a month trying to do an in-person one.
Mate, well, it was only 2 weeks ago that I saw you, so it hasn't been that long.
We're getting there. Tell me about your amp switcher and like why, like one, why, and two, how.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason I wanted to mention this is I did put up that picture on Instagram a couple of days ago of the cabs in the studio.
All your cabs, yeah.
And I thought it might be a good time to talk about the whole recording rig because it's pretty nerdy, and it's quite complicated. It's maybe not too complicated, but certainly gives a lot of flexibility. And if anyone doesn't like walks in and wants to record a guitar sound, good luck working out how everything happens. But
good luck actually using it.
But really, the whole system, it's started with the stuff that we were doing about 10, 11 years ago. And and that was what the Here Today EP that we did in like 2012. When we recorded that, like Leon has so many guitars and I have so many guitars and Leon has so many amps and I have so many amps. And it was like, well, if we're going to record something, let's use as much of this as possible because why have it if it's not going to be used, right? What's 100%. The point? And the greatest example of that concept was on the song Heaven Above, where there's like one melody that if you go check it out on Spotify or whatever, the main lead part is I think 20 different guitars. So there's always a lot of layering on the stuff that we did, particularly the early stuff. But this was not just like layering and doubling parts. This was like 20 different guitars that were hanging.
20 different times.
Yep.
20 different guitars.
And with different amps and pedals and...
Yeah, we had a few fuzz pedals and drive pedals and weird things in there at the time. And
yeah. And
that was one of those, are we doing this?
Yeah.
We're doing this.
It was like, it's fun. Like it wasn't necessary, but like, why not? If you've got the access to stuff, you may as well use it. And that's the same with the amps. It's like that for that recording, we had what was it? Soldano, JTM 45, AC30, Tiny Terror. Or maybe DSL. I don't remember if we used the DSL. Maybe we did. There's a picture.
I feel like there was a lot of DSL on that album.
Maybe there wasn't like Soldano then. I don't think that was in there. We definitely had the JTM 45. Anyway, if you're going to have a lot of amps, then you need a way of, you need a way of being able to record them. The way we did it is, I believe we had two cabinets mic'd up in what was, let's just say, the live room. It was sort of a bit reversed as to how you have it now. But where it's pretty much where everybody sees Leon's YouTube videos. That's where the amps were, and then there's a little room attached to that on the side, and that's where we were. Which is where the cab normally lives now. Yeah, and then we swapped it around when we did the second record, so it was like we sit effectively where Leon is sitting, and we put the cabs in the room. Anyway, two cabs in there. Both cabs were mic'd up, and I don't even remember the specifics of the cab. I think one was a Greenback, one was a T75, but we needed to select which amp we needed to use, and so we could use it, obviously, because we can't have four heads plugged into two cabinets. It doesn't work. Yeah. And there's not like an easy way of doing that without, there isn't. There's only one way to do it if you don't buy extra gear. I'll say that. And that was to go behind each amp and unplug it and plug the one in that you want to use. And that's
hey, sounds okay.
Yep.
But
it's completely fine. But the problem is, if you are stupid enough and like me, or you don't take any care with what you're doing, like what I do a lot of the time, there is obviously issues where you can have the wrong amp plugged in, and the wrong guitar plugged in, or have an amp not plugged into a cabinet. And we all know, like tube amps, you need to have a load on them, otherwise you risk the blowing up, or blowing a transformer or tubes or whatever. Exactly. So there's possibility for problems if you're not careful. And so that was the thing with the from that point that I've always thought about is like, how can I get more than one head to go into a cabinet so that I can record something, and so I don't have to constantly unplug stuff, right?
Now, the initial solution to this was you got one of those radial head switches, right?
Correct. And I got one when I was in America in like 2015. I think I bought it off Reverb. I think it's still the only thing I've ever bought off Reverb.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really check it very often. I should probably get on that a bit more. But the radial, what is it called? The begins with a W, doesn't it? The radial, not Workhorse. That's the 500 series rack. No, Headbone. It's the radial.
Headbone.
Yeah.
And because they had the tone bone.
Yeah.
Pedals, which I always wanted, because I was like, a tube pedal, that's obviously better.
Mate, of course, tubes are better. But the so the Headbone is, you can have two heads plugged into one cabinet. And the cool thing about it, and the thing that you also have to realize is like when you use a switcher like this, it's not just taking the output of the head, it's also taking the input to the head as well. So it's a double switching sort of system, right? So you need
double banger, mate.
Yeah, input of the head, output of the head, switched it each time. So that was a really cool solution, and that cost. I mean, I think they retailed for say 500 Australian. I got it for effectively 200 Australian, so it was a reasonable cost.
Pretty done.
And then you got one not long after that as well, but I don't think you used yours very much, did you?
A little bit. I used it for some amp comparison demos a few years ago. That was pretty handy, but it's just a clunker. You know, it's a pedal, but then you need lots of stuff patched into it.
Yeah, and so
it makes more sense having a rack.
Absolutely. I mean, like I had it at Crank, and I had it basically in a bag with all of the cables required to use it. So there was a lot of speaker cables and guitar cables and all this sort of stuff. But it was still really awesome, and like we used it on the Back to Zero album quite a bit because we were always using sort of two heads on every song. We'd usually, I think we would like do all the main rhythm parts with two different amps two different amps, but quad tracked, I suppose. So anyway, that was a really cool solution, but it was only two heads into one cabinet. And then the next step after that was I ended up getting, it was I think Cruise makes it with a K, Cruise Control or something.
Yeah, the Cruise Control, yeah.
Yeah, so I had that amp selector, and that was 5 different heads into 5 different cabinets, and it was just a relatively small box, and I got that off
our friend. Wild.
Yeah, I got that off our friend Seb, who I picked a lot of stuff up off him. I've got my dual rectifier, got my studio monitors, and picked up this amp selector. So that was a cool box. It said 5 heads into 5 cabinets, but unlike the Radial one, it didn't switch inputs. So if you wanted to use it, you still had to make sure that you swapped the guitar lead into each head when you're using it, which is like not too much of an issue. I actually also picked up at that same time a guitar selector or switcher sort of thing.
Yeah, so you could kind of distribute the signal.
Exactly. But this is one of the big problems, and this is why it took a long time to settle on the final solution. Or is that not the best phrase to use? But the solution that I chose to go with, which was that there's a lot of potential issues for ground loops and ground hum.
Yes.
So
I ran into that. I remember I had a rack, one of my first rack builds that I did with a lot of my preamps in it. Mm-hmm. And I was using the Rocktron thing. The other issue can be impedance as well when you split signals. And I was kind of trying to pull these sounds, and I was like, this preamp kind of sucks.
Yep.
And then when I plug directly into it, I'd be like, oh no, it actually doesn't suck as much as I thought. So yeah, there was the issue there was like loading and impedance. And so yeah, you've got the impedance issue, you've got the ground loops issue. You just need a box that can like isolate all the signals and route them where you want.
Exactly. And the thing is, at the time, and we're probably talking like maybe 5 years ago, there were solutions. The main one that I saw was the Kahayan one that Tim Pierce uses.
Yep.
And that's like 8 heads into 8 cabinets, and it's on a rotary switch. So you just select which one you want. So that's really, really cool and really useful. But they were quite expensive, and I didn't really want to spend the $1,500 Australian to pick one up. And I actually met them at NAMM when I went in 2019.
That's right.
I had chat to them, and I was really close to buying one, but then I think other stuff came up, and I ended up spending my money elsewhere, unfortunately. But anyway, a couple of years ago, I managed to find another selector, and it was Delise is the brand, and someone was selling one on Facebook.
Delise or Delisle?
Delisle, sorry, maybe that's the one. Yeah, does something. I never could. It's like a Frenchy sounding name, and I don't know how to say it or read it. So I'll believe whatever it is that you just said. But that was 4 heads into 4.
Don't trust me.
No, 4 heads into 4 cabinets on rotary clicky switches.
That's right.
And that was really cool. And what was also really great about that is it has a loop built into it for a load box. So if you want to insert your favorite, your favorites like load box or speaker attenuator, then that's independent of the unit. And that's what I have down there. I've got a the 2 notes torpedo reload. So you can use it as a load box. I can use it as a speaker attenuator. So I had that for about a year and a half, or I technically still have it, and did some sessions with that. Super useful. And then we get to my daughter being born at the end of 2021, And you see, Leon, this is where things really took a turn.
This is where the story really, really begins.
Because it's been pretty boring up to this point, I'm sure, for those of you that don't give a fuck about guitar amps like Leon and I, which you need to check yourself, really.
Yeah.
But, so what happened, Leon, is my daughter was born and I had a lot of nights sitting by myself. Well, not by myself, sitting in the dark with my daughter in my arms. In fact, I think the first month we were taking shifts, like I'd be up with her from, let's say, 12 till 3, and then my partner would come in from 3 till 6, and then I'd take her from 6 till 8 or something like that. This is in the morning, middle of the night sort of thing. So I was just sort of like sitting there because, you can't fall asleep when you're holding them for SIDS reasons. You don't want them to accidentally fall out of your arms and, have the worst thing happen. So I'm just on my phone the whole time, and I'm thinking about guitars and guitar amps and guitar rigs. And I started thinking I wish I could have a selector that was MIDI controllable. I just got SoundFlow and the Stream Deck, and I was like, man, it'd be cool to sit at my desk and change these amps with the Stream Deck and have all these different guitar sounds. Because one problem is my I'll put a picture up on Instagram, but where my desk is and my studio monitors are is a couple of meters away from it where my amps are. And so if you're constantly unplugging stuff and going back to the desk, it's hard to sort of compare things evenly. You need a much more instantaneous, you need more instantaneous feedback, I think. So anyway, I started thinking about that, and I started looking into what was available in terms of these switches, if there was anything on the market that would do it for me. And as a matter of fact, Kahayan does do one. Their switcher, they have a MIDI controllable 8x8 switcher. So I was like, well, that's really cool. There's also the Ampete one, which came along a couple of years ago, and that's, I believe, also 8x8, but it's 2 rack units, so it's a little bit bigger. And
seen the Michael Nielsen video with that.
Yeah, because that's what he's got, I think. But that's really cool.
Everything Michael Nielsen is pretty good. So
yeah, we got to talk to him too, man. I got a lot of time and respect for that guy. But anyway, so found that one, the Ampete one, but it was quite expensive. And then I sort of came across the KHE ones, which I think were fairly new at the time. And so that's sort of
where are they out of Switzerland?
Switzerland. So the one that I ended up buying, it's 8 heads into 4 cabinets, and it's all selected. You can do all those changes via MIDI as well. So, like I said, I have a Stream Deck on my desk, and I have a MIDI USB to MIDI box, so I can send MIDI signals out to the switcher, and just with a click of a button I can hear this amp and this cab, or that amp and that cab, which is really cool.
You can actually do a side, and the other thing with that's nice is I guess it would let you volume match stuff really quickly as well, so you can kind of do fair comparisons. Or
well, look, the volume thing is a little different because depending on the amp that you're using, if you've got a Marshall cranked up super duper loud, and I mean, this happened on the weekend when I was doing a session, loud Marshall versus the Syn 30 in a slightly cleaner sound, they're not going to get to the same volume.
Yeah, different neighborhoods.
Yeah, but it's still, if I was to say reamp a signal through, then yeah, I can absolutely level match record something down and level match it in Pro Tools, and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, settled on the KHE. It also has a loop for an attenuator, so that's really good. So if I do, and I have done this, whereby I've turned the load box to basically 0, and the speaker attenuator to 0, and then I can just take the line output and run IRs on it, or I can use the attenuator to control the excessive volume of my Marshall. So that's really cool. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. That's the not the cornerstone, that's the heart of the whole rig. And sorry, I just got a message because Leon, we got a couple of mice running around the house at the moment, and so
hey, also here.
Yep. Oh dear, shit. They got the ethical traps, mate. Get them from Bunnings. They're not too expensive.
Got the same ones.
Yep. Have you caught any yet?
Many.
Right.
Many a day, basically.
I've caught 2 in the last 24 hours.
Clearly a mouse thing happening, some kind of a population explosion. But yeah, I mean, because we've got the 2 cats down here, I kind of walked into what looked like a bit of a murder scene. I wondered what was happening, but they had just got a hold of a mouse. So one of them doesn't mess with him. The other one is just like a cold-blooded super predator. So, yeah, that was. Unfortunately for the mouse, I didn't get there soon enough. I always, even if the cats catch them, we take them off them because, you want to give them. It's a living thing. You don't want it to suffer.
Yep. No, I take mine out. I take mine like down the street a bit and let it go. The ones I've got 2 in the last day. Yeah. I try and like keep them away from the neighbors. I take them to the main road and then it's just like a free for all. They can deal with it.
Yeah.
Somewhere on Wanneroo Road there. Anyway, getting back to the switches. So the switch is awesome. The KHE, that's the center of the whole studio. But Leon, let me just tell you something, mate. It doesn't stop there. Things get even more complicated.
Because you're a man of many, many cabs, aren't you, Troy?
Well, that's not even where we're going to start, mate. We're going to start with the fact that I have a wonderful piece of rack gear in this KHE, but I got some other rack gear. And you and I both have the Rocktron, the 8-channel loop thing, the Patchmate.
Yep.
With the blue knobs on it, the blue buttons on it.
Patchmate.
And so I thought to myself, like, what would be cool is there's a few drives that I use a lot in sessions. So maybe I could run the Patchmate in the rack with like next to the KHE, and then on a drawer have like Tube Screamer, Rat, the clone, the Anarchy Audio one that we have, a few other pedals, and that way I can just switch them in front of the amp depending on what song I'm doing, rather than like have a pedal board where I have to bend down on the ground too much. It's like lifted off the ground a bit, so it's a bit easy to change the settings. So I also installed that. So that was awesome. Like that's been really awesome. The pedals tend to change a little bit depending on the song, and if I get something new, like I've got a exotic RC booster at the moment that I've had it for maybe 12 months or so, but I put that in the rack to mess with that with some sounds, and that was cool. So sometimes like the Tube Screamer one might change for a different pedal. But yeah, that's in there. So the signal flow works like this. You take your guitar sound and it actually does not go straight into an amp. The very first thing is a DI, which the way that I record guitars is I always have a DI signal recording in parallel to my electric guitar signal, like the amp signal, I mean. And the reason is sort of for twofold. Firstly, the clean sound, it's not a desirable sound in terms of getting the guitar sound you want. But if you are trying to do any editing and you're doing relatively heavy guitars, you don't have transients on the mic channels because it effectively just compresses all of the spikes out of it, so you can't see anything. So just having a DI like underneath your amp track, you can see where a note starts.
And then obviously if you ever want to reamp it,
that's the second reason. Exactly. So you can reamp your signal and you can also run the do your editing. So the guitar goes into the DI, into the Little Labs Ready or Red DI, however you say it. Then the output of that goes to Pro Tools, and then the link through goes into the front of my Rocktron Patchmate, which again I can turn pedals on and off with that if I want to or not. And then it goes out of the Patchmate into the rear input on the KHE amp selector.
There you go.
Meaning if I do want to patch, like completely avoid any of the pedals or the Patchmates or anything like that, I could theoretically go straight into the front of the KHE because there's buffers and stuff with a bit of this gear, which doesn't really bother me too much. But if you want to be a bit more purist about it, then you can do it. And then from there, in the internal loop of the amps of the KHE, I've got my 2 notes torpedo reload as a attenuator. And then I have 4 cabinets on the output, which 3 of them are in my live room and 1 is in my control room. So if I do want to just hear a sound like sitting next to me, I can put it onto its amp out 4 for me and listen to the amp in the room to test stuff out. Because that's a different experience than hearing it through mics. I've mentioned that before, and I've been trying to do that a little bit more. So it's very, very functional and very versatile. And there's more, but I'll pause for a second. Is there something you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's kind of one of that once, it's exactly the same as if you've got a studio with outboard gear, right? Where at some point you actually need to properly invest in a good patch bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The issue with guitar amplifiers is because they need to be loaded and because stuff like guitar pedals can be finicky with impedance and splitters and isolation. it's just like those specialty pieces of gear are maybe not as easy to come by. So you kind of need
absolutely.
to find the piece of gear that does everything you need. Whereas, like basically every studio worth its salt is going to have a patch bay. So there's a lot of options for patch bays out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's also unfortunate because it is a fairly boring thing to buy. Like what you're doing is you're spending thousands of dollars on something that just saves you time from unplugging something and plugging something in. And if you don't have a lot of gear, it's fucking pointless. I do have a lot of gear, and I'll put some pictures up of the cabinets because I have a rack with 5 heads in it at the moment. I've got my dual rectifier, 5150, Mesa Stiletto, my Splawn Nitro, and my JMP. That's all in a rack. They're all coming up into the switcher 1 to 5, so I can at any point listen to those amps, and then the other 3 channels on the switcher are floating. So if I can pull different amps in as I choose. So yeah, like it's just trying to find solutions. Like if I wanted to try and get a guitar sound and try 3 different amps with a band, it becomes a real mess of cables. Like it's always been an issue. So
yeah, and it is. It's there's something to be said about chaos only creates more chaos in the studio with that, where it's like not having to chase cables, not having to do that is kind of crazy.
And
so,
like for me,
the big thing for me is leaning behind stuff, because I do that all the time here where I'm like, I've got my desk set up so that if I have to get to something behind it, I just pull the desk out a bit. I can actually walk behind there. The number of times I have put myself in unnecessary, uncomfortable positions, like with my back and stuff like that, where you just hold a dumb pose for 30 seconds too long, and then you're not having a good time. So there's also that. There's the ergonomics of it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons for this, man, and it's also like I find it way more creative when you can just be like, right, what do you want to try? Do you want to hear this? Do you want to hear that? You can, being creative comes in a lot of different ways. It might be chaining pedals together. It might be trying different guitars. It might be doing whatever. But for me, that's one side that I can take care of relatively easily. And I said I did it the other day. It's like, great. What amp do you want to hear? Let's try this one. Let's try that one. The other cool thing that I did as well was my Little Labs DI. It's a reamp box as well as a DI. So I have because I've recorded the clean signal into Pro Tools. I was able to play it back through the DI through the exact same signal path, and I just had to hit one button on the front of the DI to make it go from the live guitar input to the reamp input.
I love that so much. And I've got the same DI now, and I've been using it so much.
Well, it's so useful because, like I said, I recorded the song with the band, and then just played it back, and then without having to ask the guitar player to keep playing, we just try different guitar sounds, and then we ended up, once we picked what we liked, we went through and recorded that sound. So it was more just a guide to get the tone, but it saved a lot of time and a lot of fucking around. And, if you're playing, it's not that you can't hear what you're doing, but your brain is trying to focus on 2 different things at once. And I think it can be a little deceiving. I certainly find that. Like the sounds that I've recorded when I've, been playing live versus, having a reamp signal through, or even a loop signal, trying to get a guitar tone in the Axe Effects or whatever. It's like just really different. So
yeah, I totally agree.
It's been really great. But then there's a couple of other little things to touch on, right, with this system, because it's a long story going through this, and as I said, it's somewhat complicated, unnecessarily so, maybe.
I'm sure people listening will understand the struggle, though.
Yeah. So I have, three of the cabinet outputs on the switcher go into my live room, into the guitar cabs. And in the picture that I put up on Instagram, there's about 7 or 8 cabs, I think, in that photo. There's I think there's 7 4x12s and 1 1x12.
I'm going to look out right now for you, Troy.
I'll explain, because you got Pinky on top. So Pinky is, it has the Warehouse, Greenback, and Reaper as the top 2 speakers. And then it has a T75 from a JCM 800 cab and a Greenback in it, right? Greenie is the one next to that, and that has speakers from a JCM 800 and JCM 900 cabs, so the T75s, so 2 of each.
Yep.
Then the Marshall on the bottom left is the vintage 30 cab I've had forever.
Yep.
Of which
good cab.
It has 3 vintage 30s. The top right hand one is the best sounding one, And then the top left, I've changed the speaker out to a creamback.
Nice.
And then the Vintage 30 that I took out of that cab is in the 1x12 Marshall cab, open back cab. That's in like the top corner of that photo as well. Because why not? And then the second from the bottom, second from the left is a Jens Benz cab, which is an oversized ported cab. I paid nothing for it, but it sounds really, really good. And it has 3 of the stock speakers, which is some Eminence things. And then in the top left-hand corner, it has an EVM speaker, which is, another really, really cool sound.
Yeah.
And it's mostly in that cabinet because it's the only 8-ohm 4x12 that I have. And the EV that I bought is an 8-ohm speaker. So there you go. The Marshall next to that, which doesn't have a grill on it, is just a JCM 900 cab with T75s, which I only got that recently. Very, very, very cheap. But it sounds really good. But it was in really shitty condition, so I had to glue the dust caps back on them, and I did a pretty shitty job of it, but it still sounds really good.
Hey man, that's where the tone's at, right?
And then the other Marshall, which is on like the far right with the basket, what is it called? The basket grill. That's another Greenbacks cab that I've had for a while, which sounds really, really good. I think it's like an early 2000s one. And so the way I've got it set up is I'm trying to go through and work out what speakers I like with what amps, and also what mics I like on what speakers. So it's a bit of a process. I've got a spreadsheet. I'm making notes on and making comments of things that I think work really well. For example, the Fryette Synergy sounds really, really, really good into the the green cabinet with the T75s. That's a really nice pairing, which I didn't realize was going to be as good as it is. And the Splawn actually sounds great through that too. And everyone hates the T75s, but we've shown them some love over the last few episodes.
The T75s are, they're a standard for a reason. I know the JVM was designed around the T75s.
There you go.
Because that's the stock Marshall speaker.
That's why would you do anything else?
It would make sense to voice the amp for it.
Yeah. So one thing on the cabinet, on the picture, if you have a look at it, Leon, the top 2 speakers are mic'd up with, I think there's probably,
those little, you mount them on the cab, they're little gravity things.
So they're made by Gravity. They're like cab, I think they're called cab, they're not the Audix cab grabber things, but it's effectively the same thing. So mic stands that clip onto the cab. And my goal is to have one of those on maybe not every speaker, but all the speakers that I like the most.
That's pretty cool.
Unfortunately, they've almost doubled in price in the last 6 months. And I think they've been discontinued. So I managed to find two more this morning that I've picked up from somewhere over east, and they're on their way now. But I've got SM57s, Audix i5s, and Sennheiser 609s at the moment that I'm trying out on these speakers, and I've found a few things that I really like. So this brings me to the last part of the setup, right? Which I know it's been a very long discussion. So one issue, right, is if you have all of your heads mic'd up through different speaker cabinets, and then you decide to change from this speaker cabinet to that speaker cabinet, it's not as simple as just pressing the one button in terms of hearing it through the studio monitors, because each mic preamp goes into a different input into Pro Tools. So it means you also have to change the input into Pro Tools to make that happen, right?
So we're at a more than one press at the moment.
Yeah. And that's not that big of a deal, but it's a bit of a pain in the ass. Like, for example, if you were to accidentally click the wrong input, then you're not going to hear the guitar sound you expect, and that's not great. That's not fun. Maybe it's going to sound like something on the other side of the room or whatever. So I have this SSL Sigma summing mixer, which I've had in my studio for about maybe 6 years. And all of my mixes, or not all my mixes, but a lot of my mixes will run through that as a hardware unit. It's got 32 analog inputs. And what I've got is my mic preamps on the that I'm using, which is a collection of a few different things, but predominantly some classic API VP26s, so like API sounding mic pre's. I've got some Daking mic pre's. I've got a JLM or a couple of JLM mic pre's as well.
All very tasty stuff.
That's right. So all of those mics the mic pre's come to individual inputs on the summing mixer. And then the output of the summing mixer comes into two channels into Pro Tools. So what that means is that I can just hit the one button on the cab, like one button on the for the head, one button for the cab, and it all just comes into the input, so I can hear instantly what I'm trying to change. And that came so in handy on the weekend because we had some of the speakers were not sounding good.
Yeah, right.
Like the creamback sounded like fucking ass for the guitar sounds that we're trying to go for. The greenback sounded okay. The V30 sounded okay. The greenback I think it was the greenback of the Reaper maybe that we ended up going with. But yeah, there was some issues. So some stuff that they didn't really like.
If you didn't have these options though, you'd get stuck, and then you're trying to polish a turd rather than just like, oh, change to that speaker and it sounds good, we can keep working.
Man, I've done that so much. Like I think I'm really appreciating how difficult it is to record guitars and how different things are. Like I've know that in some way or another for the last however many years, but when you start to get into speakers and how they affect the tone of something, it's massive. Like like a vintage rock sound, it needs that like greenbacks thing. You can't get that out of a vintage 30. Like no matter how much you try.
I should really bring down that. I should just really bring down my that pre-roller greenback that I got.
You should hear that, man.
Just put it in the cab and record it, because, like I said, everything you play through it, you're like, oh, there's the sound of the 70s.
Yeah,
it's
like
so play
specific.
A Mark Series amp through it and it sounds like a vintage Marshall. You're like, it's that speaker doing its thing.
But like that's the thing I had the other day, right? So the band, it was a rock, like pretty, I wouldn't say like classic rock song, but we leaned on, it was definitely the greenback we used for a lot of rhythm parts, but like that was part of the sound. Like I've swapped to the creamback and I swapped to the greenback, and it was just like, it loses that sort of whatever the top end, I don't know what they refer to it as, but there's that kind of like squishy, bright, almost fuzzy top end thing that's like so identifiable as a greenback, and I can't EQ that. Like I can't make a vintage 30 do that thing. It's part of that sound. And for me to go and change all these cabs and then re-mic it and get the mic in the right position, all that sort of stuff, it's like, it just takes too long, And I was talking to this band because what I often am doing in my sessions is trying to work quickly, but not work lazily. It's just, you don't like,
you want to get to the good stuff as fast as you can.
Well, there's no budget. Like, I watch these Eric Valentine videos because he's the best guy on YouTube for like how to record a song. But, some of the stuff, for example, talking about recording All American Rejects or take Queens of the Stone Age or whatever, like they've got days and weeks and months to find a guitar sound. I've got like 10 minutes, 20 minutes because at the end of the day, like the bands don't have budget or don't have time, and so many people that I work with, we're trying to work around other people's like work hours or whatever. It's just not an easy thing to budget
no one's on a salary for that. It's like they're living their lives and they're trying to make this work.
Exactly. So any of this stuff that I can do on my end to save people time and make the process more smooth, it's way more creative than like, and even the guitar player the other day said something like that. He's like, I'm usually so rushed when it comes to tracking guitars that I don't get to play with sounds. So he just like plugs in whatever it is that he has. Probably still gets a good sound out of it. But at least we know now. And funnily enough, I mean, he saw that I had the JMP there and was like, I really want to play that. And it didn't work. Like it wasn't the right sound. The stiletto won again.
There you go.
And actually,
the gift that keeps on giving.
The other main rhythm sound of all the amps was the Synergy Syn 30 in the clean channel cranked up. Yeah, cranked up with Klon in front of it, getting a little drive. So that was the sound. And it's like, we tried a lot of shit and that was the sound. But I said that took maybe 10 minutes to get that guitar sound.
Yeah, that's cool. Rather than 4 hours in.
Yeah. And it's just the way. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's the way that I've worked to try and make everybody's life easier in the studio. Mostly my own, but yeah, it's been successful so far. And I'm always changing stuff and updating stuff. And I'm sure I'd like to get another KHE switcher so I can have all the cabinets up at the moment. Because the one, not that hard, but if I want to try, go use the Jens Benz cab, I have to go into the other room.
You do have to do some cabling.
Do some cabling on that end, but that's not that difficult to do. That's one
Troy.
thing.
More is more.
More is more.
How can less be more?
So
that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
Pretty.
I mean,
a pretty good overview of I'm sure a lot of people out there who own multiple amps might be thinking about this. Maybe it helps them know what they're going to be in for with something like that, or maybe gives them some more motivation to actually do it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Like, I mean, even if you're just doing like hobby stuff, why would you fuck around with plugging cables and checking, like, you know, in terms of impedance, I just make sure my heads are sort of the same, because that could be a potential issue. But yeah, you can make your life really easy, and it gives you more time to play, and that's kind of the thing that you want to be focusing on, not the.
If you've only got half an hour to play guitar a day, you don't want to be spending 15 minutes of it setting your rig up. You want to hit the button and be in the zone as quickly as possible. We'd love to hear from anybody listening to this. Like, message us on Instagram, send us photos of your rigs, tag us in your rigs, and we'll talk about it on future episodes.
Yeah, I said I'll put pics of this stuff up, so you can check it out. And
the visual companion to the Gear Podcast,
mate. That's what you want. So,
on that note, Troy, I think we should leave these lovely people to their day, and I hope you have a fantastic first Dockers gig for the year.
Thanks,
I'm
mate.
I'm going to be watching.
Oh, yeah?
Make sure. Hopefully they put you on the big screen. Well, they always do. Hopefully the TV films you.
Yeah, I think it's 4:30 p.m. Perth time. So
fantastic,
mate. Just make sure you're there checking it out. Everybody else, you can watch it on KO or watch it on your favorite screen or whatever. I'll take a pic around up there. I'll put that on the Instagram as well. You can see what it looks like.
Sounds very, very good. All right, mate.
Happy days, mate.
Pleasure as always. We'll see everybody. Well, everybody will hear us next week at the same time. Looking forward to it. Thank you again to everybody who tunes in, and we look forward to making a bunch of noise about noises very soon.
All right. Peace out, everyone.